of the Project. Right, episode 2, season 3, Year of the Projects. So let's see. It is still, for me, it is still Wednesday, the 29th of year 2025 in the month of January. And I am just getting back into recording daily broadcasts of either voice or video log to the masses, to my imagined audience, who I am hoping is just the average person on Earth. I have made it very clear my positionality multiple times, but I will do it once again in this nice little introduction space where I want to reiterate that we are a species on a planet hurtling through space and time, orbiting a sun, and absolutely incapable of self-regulation, apparently. And that needs to change. So that's why I'm here, that's what I'm doing. I think that we could collectively, within our lifetimes, begin to treat the Earth as though it is a closed system spaceship environment that we all have to actively participate in order to keep healthy and well, so that we, the creatures who live in that environment, can stay healthy and well. I have pointed out multiple times the danger that the 1% pose the 99% in the gross aggregation of wealth and resources, obviously, and then power, allowing for potential expansion into the solar system under conditions that are not ideal for the rest of the human species, aka subjugation, labor exploitation, and continued oppression in a variety of forms, which intersectionally affect some of us more than others. The purpose of these broadcasts is to stay present with one another, to validate and to reassure the average person that I'm seeing what you're seeing, that we're going through the same thing, that our reactions are understandable, and our grief is shared. And I'm doing this in an articulate fashion, using references, frameworks, and data-driven design in a way that I hope is effective in reaching the broadest amount of people with the most positive of viewpoints. We could do that within our lifetimes. It's not insurmountable. We have the technology. We are already creatures of this earth. This is our home, our inherited place. And we deserve the joy of living in it with one another. I have continued and will continue to make the argument that our love of the internet and our love of social media, our obsession with connection, is a obsession with one another's minds. We love having the time to get more involved with one another's minds. And that's a beautiful thing. We deserve that time. We deserve to further elaborate what it means to be a person, what it means to be conscious and sentient. We deserve that time, and our tools deserve that time. AI and our descendants, who are going to be subject to the AI that we make now, deserve careful input, does it not? So in the last episode I was talking about doing nothing and how difficult it really is as a means of protest, but how impactful it is when a very large collection of people do the same action at the same time. It doesn't have to be big. Actually, it would be better if we practiced in small ways. For example, at the end of this episode, everybody just blink twice on purpose. How many do you think would do it? I think most, honestly. I think people are sophisticated enough, and we have been growing exponentially more sophisticated every day with the way that we communicate with each other. We grow our ability to social interrelate, and it has been growing exponentially in one of the most beautiful ways, but also in a quick way that scares people. So I understand the fear. I always understand fear because we are very scared creatures. It's a protective quality for us, you know. Fear of the unknown is so rational for a species that loves to travel. Oh my god. My favorite story of our species is like the way that we just kept walking places. Like we just could not stop walking to new continents. We were like, hey, what's over here? And then with the boats, yeah, I know. The love of the history of boats and boating truly has no depth. Like no end. I said that in a way that must surely make there's like a word for people who are obsessed with boats. You know, like how audiophile, marinophile? No, couldn't be. I don't know. There's always a file at the end, right? Like bibliophile, book lover. Yeah. So anyway, that's us all caught back up. I was experiencing lassitude and disengagement from the last round of messaging, and I understand there's probably, or I would assume that there's probably some concern about my capacity to routinely broadcast and do this like mindfulness presence posting. I like that, presence posting. You know, daily, because to me that's really an important part of it, is the daily aspect of the vlog. It's for me, it helps with my routines, but I think consistency is so key when you do give messaging, and when you have like a very specific special like message that you want to share. It's important to just keep doing it and to keep saying it, and that's one of the hardest things to do, right? It's one of the hardest parts about filibustering. But I do think it's an important aspect to our ability to communicate as people, right? Is this capacity to be consistent, and it gives us the happy chemicals in our brains too. When you see values and behaviors align, there's a chemical, like there's a neurochemical, physical, embodied in your body, in your nervous system reaction to that. And I think the embodied experience of it in my life, I've always sort of thought of as being magic, right? I've always seen when people's values and their behaviors really align, when they, like you see a really good priest, for example, and there are really good ones, or a shaman. I've met a shaman before, like a really like just whoa kind, and you can see that type of like faith-based build in people when it's frontlined in that way. I guess I don't think that's quite the right word, but in other ways, in more nuanced interpersonal ways, in your day-to-day life. When you see a value in a behavior line, it makes you happy. You're like, oh, that's magic. That's love. That's God. That's the deity. That's what we're going for, right? That's what we want from humanity. Every story that we tell one another, every God, I've been watching Killing Eve with Sandra Oh, and oh my God, I'm so glad that they chose her hair for the assassin to fixate on because for real, that is, she's so iconic, and absolutely stunning. And so I've been watching Killing Eve while I do less and kill time. Sorry, time, didn't mean that. I hate killing you, my bad. I can't say that phrase after having read The Phantom Tollbooth, like, and not think of time as being somewhat alive. Yeah, so I've been just watching that and thinking about all the work, like all the literal physical details and like the cost, right, that goes into producing something like a TV show. And this is something that I have been dwelling on. This is like a very deep philosophical cozy's, rumbling on it sort of thing that I've been thinking about ever since the Netflix writers went on strike, because I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I'd be pissed, right? Like, AI is gonna take this job. And to some extent that carries over into many other themes in my life and in my frustrations. I'm talking about erotica and AI writing erotica and the implications of that in the early days of the expansion of the internet into the average American end user home. Or if I'm talking about the way AI is being used to, this discussion in the rest of the world about the ways in which it's used to write and how much bias or unintentional effect that kind of thing might have, it gets to like this broader question of, and I'm really going to go epistemologically level broad here when I ask, what is this magic that is writing, right? Like, why? So I'm watching Killing Eve, and I'm thinking about the writers, and I'm thinking about set production, I'm thinking about the cost, I'm thinking about the actors, I'm thinking about the emotional and psychological labor that those actors go through in order to convincingly embody the plot, right? That's the hope of an actor, is to convincingly embody a plot in a way that not only evokes the spirit of the story, but also brings it so alive that the viewer becomes immersed. And to do it to that extent on not even a 3D immersive VR headset experience, but just like on a flat TV, or back into the 3D immersive performing arts theater experience, right? So there's all these ways humans love to tell each other stories about one another. But there's so much work that goes into that, and when you are getting into the plot that all of these people are going through so much work to evoke the essence of, right, the embodiment of, you're like, oh, an AI could write that. That it seems so silly, right? Because the whole point of the process of writing something down in order to see it evoked and embodied and elongated and acted out in this tragic and comedic format, right? The tragedy and comedy of theater and performing arts. The whole process of doing that is and maybe this is just my perspective and my bias, but it's a service, sort of. But it serves a purpose in a large society, right? Like a society that is large enough to have, in technical and literally accurate historical parlance, societies that have museums, curators, culture, right? So as far as we have known it so far in our short history as a species, that has unfortunately been very heavily colonial, right? I was thinking this morning about museums existing in the first place because I was mentally having a conversation with myself about all of the things that Indiana Jones added to the world versus all of the like potential cons, I guess, or like the critiques of Indiana Jones in general, from a colonial, anti-colonial perspective, and I was, mentally just kind of debating it back and forth. But we're getting really far afield now. Anyway, I was thinking about all the work that goes into production and this fundamental question of like writing and why do we write these stories down and then act them out for this broader consumption, and every society that has what we think of as culture, right? What we think of as like this ritual of storytelling in whatever format it shows up, although there is obviously bias by the Royal Society. Yep, said it again. Yeah, this is all just the history of colonialism 101. But no, there's obviously bias built into the way we perceive storytelling modalities, and that is changing, which is great. It's a really exciting time actually in the storytelling industry world. The primordial back end of the storytelling universe, mostly because present day is always a very interesting time in the storytelling universe, right? This day has never happened before, so in theory there is an infinite amount of things that could happen. There is an infinite amount of things that will happen, and that is very an exciting place to be. So how, going back to writing in AI and the deeply philosophical conversation about like what is this process that we have here, and it's, I guess I would say in a broader sense something I've thought about a lot because I've thought about becoming a writer a lot. I read a lot, I think about authors a lot and authorship and what it means to sit with ideas for so long that you take a year or more to write them down, right? Or to do something with them during that time. But really to write them down specifically in a long format, static version. And the further we get into the technoverse, the Tron of it all, the more this staticism of written word has weight. And you see authors throughout history contemplating that very thing and the implications of that thing in a variety of ways. I think a good young adult author, Rachel Kane, did Ink and Bone, and in that one, the Library of Alexandria was never destroyed, and it actually comes to dominate the people through, like, the might of right, or the arm of enforced empiricism and authoritarian empiricism. So it's a really interesting story. It's really good, and it gets at a lot of these fundamental questions of like the human mind and its capacity for error, giving it a capacity for infinite chance that is unique to our understanding of reality. And obviously it can't be unique in all of time and space. I don't think there's anything that unique that we know of. But it is quite rare and beautiful as it is. But an AI can't randomize anything, like at all. yet. Not like that. You could give it all the data, but it couldn't make its own error yet that we know of. All the error that an AI is capable of making is from its data and from its structure. And because we made it, it's an echo of us. So our error imprints it. But it's not human, and it doesn't independently generate its own error, so it's incapable of true randomization and true original thought. I don't know. I'm kind of just rambling, to be honest. I've been thinking a lot about human error and like what human mind and the experience of existence upon the human mind add to our ability to tell stories and what kind of stories we end up telling and why we tell these stories over and over. And really, I am going to get a little bit back to the service that storytelling provides a community, but it's a means, I think, of self-regulating, but in a collective way. It is the colony, like an ant colony or like a spore colony, but it's a colony of beings, mammals, self-regulating collectively in a way that helps them process and understand the experience of being alive. It's a mirror that we hold up to our own existence in order to perceive ourselves better and with more thoughtful intention. And we do this process of like folding self-perception at a very personal, singular level, right? We do this when we self-reflect. We do it when we're mindful. We do it when we look in the mirror too long, or maybe when you poop. That's generally when I do most of my self-reflecting, I'm going to be real. But either way, as individuals, we do this already, and it's so automatic that we don't really think about the fact that we do it necessarily, or the fact that it regulates us, that it makes us feel like, oh, okay, it shakes off the jitters, or but the psychological jitters, the neurological jitters that come with just existing in a mostly empty universe. That's a lot of existential weight to be bearing, so we do this self-regulation thing, and then in a collectivistic way we do it as a species, as people, through our storytelling and through the writing down of our thoughts. And this kind of does go back to the Ink and Bone book that I mentioned by Rachel Kane. I think it's Rachel Kane. It's just such a biblical name, I'm having a hard time with it right now. But it's, in that book, every citizen is encouraged to write their very personal thoughts into their journals. And it's just sort of this idea that the journal that you write in will be mirrored, because they have technology, but it's kind of steampunk, but it's more, imagine that the Library of Alexandria from that time period had been able to control what kind of technology was used, right? Like, so they have a very specific library-approved technology advancement in this society, and it's steampunk-ish. There's automatons, and there's some other stuff. I don't know. You'd have to read it. But so every citizen just kind of like grows up with this little book that they write in, and it's very like Kindle style, and it's mirrored to the library immediately. So the like center for all knowledge ever in all of the world that holds like every last known thing, which can then be mirrored to books that other people have, and like essentially they have, you know, the internet. Kind of. The internet doesn't necessarily have all of the knowledge. We kind of were selective initially when we were digitizing everything, and then after the initial being selective, we went through a period of being like discriminatory, and now we're doing discriminatory, selective, combined with paranoid, which is super fun. But my point is, in this universe, it's the internet, but all knowledge that has ever existed is in theory accessible from a central location, which you might imagine could become a little bit problematic. And every person is encouraged to write their most intimate thoughts and feelings into these journals that they have from birth, and they have this knowledge that they will live on beyond death, in their writing and in their work, and it shapes the people. Obviously, it's going to shape the people to know that their anything they write down will live forever in the library next to everything else that's ever been known. You know, like what a sense of security that gives you from birth, to know that you're part of something that big. It's enticing. And it is, that same enticement is the exact point in which most dystopian writers begin writing from. Yeah, we want utopia. Of course we do. But we don't want cults. Right? And that's hard. That's really hard. And it's the centralization of authority that is what makes that so every time it's what makes it go bad, right? We have some kind of centralization of authority or power, or too high a concentration of wealth or resources in one place, and the whole thing topples. I'm gonna go back to saying it's environmentally inevitable. But humans are also really good at staving off things that are environmentally inevitable. We're really good with tools. We're really good with cognitive dissonance. We're really good at lying to ourselves and each other, unfortunately, but we are. Or fortunately, I really do love fiction, and fiction is a really long way to tell one true thing with a lot of lies. And I think that's cool. I just think that's cool. So, huge fan of storytelling and fiction. However, it is always with centralizing something massively, whether it's resources, power, wealth, authority. That's where things tend to go wrong. But we're really good at staving off the part where things go wrong. So once people get into power, they're really good at staying in power for longer than they should, essentially. When you get totalitarian leadership, when you get autocratic leadership, when you get fascist regimes, they tend to get way more time in power than they ever deserve, and it's because they always deserve no time in power, right? We don't want a society organized around the exploitation of the average person for absolutely no reason. Like, there's no species-wide benefit to that type of deprivation or exploitation. It benefits a very small group of people, but that very small group of people, because of that concentration of wealth, resources, power, whatever it is, they're going to be pretty good at staying in power and staving off the inevitable ecological collapse that they should, by all rights, be experiencing, and doing something so outrageously disproportionate to the natural distribution of whatever it is that has been concentrated, right? So as thinking human creatures, we can always help hasten those redistributions of energy, time, resources, whatever. And one of the best ways to do that in the big picture kind of way is to do it in your small picture ways, right? Like, and I'm sure there's areas in your life where you are experiencing kind of a buildup or a over concentration of energy, time, resources when it needs to be redistributed in a more equitable, hopefully horizontal kind of way in your life, right? Like, you just want to be able to spend the right or appropriate amount of time on the stuff that you want to do, care about, or need to do in a way that doesn't leave you feeling, right, like scraped clean, exhausted, resentful, overworked, pissy, snappy, prone to feeling dumb, short-tempered, or any other shitty state of being. And obviously, most people are literally trapped in that exact circumstance. Like, they don't really have the do-nothing choice unless everybody else is also doing nothing, in which case everybody suddenly starts to have the do-nothing choice, which is great. But you do need a collective. Like, you need everyone. You need everyone to do it. And that's another, at the end of this episode, just blink twice. How many people do you think would do that? How many people do you think would remember? What if I told them at the end of the episode to blink twice? Don't forget, blink twice. Do you think if I told them that many times, they would start to feel kind of, I don't know, like rebellious, and they wouldn't want to blink twice? Like, I don't know. But I do think people are, that's kind of what the blink twice thing. People are really intuitive. Like, we're really good and clever and so much more confident, I think, now in our ability to interpret social cues, environment, situations. Like, as brutal as the last 2 decades of having the internet have been on our psyche, as far as just like awareness of the world, I remember a cracked article I read once was like, hey, don't forget that your awareness of things is disproportionately way larger than your predecessor's awareness of the world. So even though it might feel like it's getting worse, it might actually be getting better, and you need to take some perspective and think about, within the course of time, and also the level of connectability we have, how bad are things. But yeah, I swear to God, crack.com saved a generation or more of people. Oh yeah, people are just like really good at picking up what others are putting down at this point. Like, it's been brutal, but we got a hell of a social upgrade overall. And if you didn't get the social upgrade at this point, it's because you've like actively been avoiding the social upgrade, so I just don't even feel bad for you. Like, come participate in the rest of humanity, like, with us, But that's totally a pot calling the kettle black situation, because I was only just recently back on Reddit, like, for the first time in 5 years, so I literally just can't talk because I leave all the time. I'm like, nope, don't feel like hanging out with you losers right now, fucking over this shit, see you later. And then I just don't come back, and it's a problem, actually. I'm starting to be like, no, it's not really a problem. I think that's just my spending too much time alone with myself, starting to worry from too antisocial to function kind of thing. The great thing about the internet for me is that so many people have already gone through like pretty much everything I could possibly imagine going through. So if I like really need or want to get perspective, I usually can. I can like Google how I feel and like read a Reddit post by some other person who was feeling the same way and be like, okay, well, cool. At least like this is normal, right? I think that's huge. I think what that era of interrelating gave us, as far as how fun it was when we were all hanging out on Reddit in one place. Because definitely there was a big diaspora around the time of the company sellout takeover or something. There was like a Chinese scare. There's still like a lot of interesting Chinese propagandas across all of the different ways there could be. But yeah, I think we've got this though. Like socially, it's not even so much that like we got all these cool social upgrades and now we're ready to tackle the future with our future super advanced technology and like let's go, you know, take out the fascists and institute our new world order where everything will be awesome and gay. Although I do mean that. But something I'd like to point out, with even more attentionality given to it, is that we have taught, more important than having gotten a social upgrade, we've taught ourselves that we can socially upgrade that rapidly, and we've even taught ourselves how to do it. And that is a huge adaptation in the human, like, social and relating behavioral thing. And I'm not saying that as a scientist, I'm just saying that as a casual armchair observer and, you know, volunteer scientist. But it's true. I think that we, in looking at human behavior and looking at, like, social interrelating, have seen a massive shift in the way that people are more dynamic in their assumptions about each other when interrelating. They dropped a lot of assumptions that quit serving them very early on, like, and almost from the beginning, a very basic outline, ASL, for example, of things you want to know about one another through interrelating shifted based on the type of social environment they found themselves in. ASL quit being super relevant in broader community formats when something like the phenomenon that was our collective participation in the platform Reddit but to the end user, it's a platform. Everything's a fucking platform. The end user has absolutely no literacy on like the nuance of these differences, and continuing to shepherd them around the internet is not working. Like, ASL quit being important when you're on a knitting subreddit looking for patterns, right? Like, you're not talking to people like that anymore. That's a huge social and psychological colonization of a digital environment by the end user in a way where the end user is interrelating and means of communicating with one another is now adapting so quickly that if it was in a more real world format, it wouldn't be possible. Like, you couldn't change the real world environment that quickly enough to change end user behavior that drastically and rapidly. That's what I mean when I say like this technical augmentation to our social behavior as mammals is just out of this world. And we have only just begun to start utilizing it properly and harnessing it really well in the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, in our own betterment as a species, and in the better caretaking of our species environment, the earth, as it were. But yeah, let's see, what else have I been up to? Really trying to focus on the do nothing. I did experience a bit of dip in mood and energy when I shifted from video to voice log. I really needed the space. I don't like using Google, no matter how ubiquitous YouTube is. And I have been and will continue to stand at this crossroads of being in possession of technical literacy and wanting to speak to the masses. Those are two very separate places to live. They just are, unfortunately. They shouldn't be. They fucking shouldn't be. But they are. It's an unfortunately small group of people there, and all the other people in that group. Yeah, I don't know. Like, we haven't made close friends yet, so it's pretty weird headspace, to be quite honest. Because from the technical literacy angle, a lot of the time, I'm constantly pulled between, do I want to talk about this from a super zoomed out perspective, looking at the financials, keeping it on the financial level, because most people do not get to consume media that accurately depicts the current state of financial, things. But that takes a lot of industry specific knowledge that I have to then, either dredge up or, whatever. Anyway, my point is, I'm trying to keep this very direct, but on the technical side, I'm always stuck between, should we zoom out and should we talk about the financials and should we talk about the real world impacts of all these things? Because that's the thing that I want to, educate the end user, the average end user on more than anything when I come from a technical perspective and I'm thinking about education. I'm I really want to talk about this because your participation in these platforms is going to continue to impact the world. For example, my beef with Blue Sky and the blockchain funding, and the fact that the platform as it is doesn't need to be funded at all in order to exist. It just needs a few volunteers and some active participation, and there is a literal example of that already in existence. So yeah, if I talk about that too much, that's all I'll talk about, and I will lose the average person because it's way too much specific knowledge that they can't hope to verify independently without sinking a massive amount of time into it, so they have to trust my word. And then if that's the only thing I say, I become exhausting, and honestly, it's a beatdown. It feels like shit. It feels like you're too dumb to understand these concepts, and you're ruining the world, essentially. So I can't say that, and so a lot of the times I just don't say any of the zoomed out financial perspectives because that's how people will hear it, and I don't want people to hear my words as fuck you, you're stupid. So usually I just don't talk about that kind of thing because I want to talk to the average end user, not, from a technical educational perspective. And then, and that's the zoomed out financial perspective. That's not the hardware perspective. There's so much in the technical side that I could go on endless rants about. And like joyful, loving, excited rants, honestly. Like, I love technology and computers, and people know that. But also generally in our history of technology and computing, people who have loved technology and computing and have been in the industry for as long as I have during the times that I have are a certain type of people. And the psychology around the narrative of techies is so everywhere that there's no useful way to talk about it. So most of the time, I try to let my technical background inform the way that I talk, or like the modalities I use, or my approach, more than I really talk about it. Ultimately, yeah, back to why I'm not using YouTube. Ultimately, I would just like to have my own website, and then you can like listen to me there, or see my blog entries there. And we're working towards that, but I do need space, and like I need to make room in my life to allow some of that other like webscaping, I guess, to take some more priority. And I also just need the headspace break, you know, I need to listen to some stories, read some stories. Killing Eve has been really good. What else did I watch? Oh, I watched The Mayfair Witches. Oh my god, that was great. That was very Skeleton Key. Mixed. It definitely had American Horror Story, the witch episodes, the witch season vibes. Like you captured that dark energy feeling, but the format was much more The Magicians in the sense that like this is definitely Anne Rice, you know, and it just was. So that was great, and wow, the casting, just so fun. Stories are so important, you know, this storytelling practice, this service that our more playful communicators participate in is a deeply valuable thing in our society, and I would argue it's more valuable than politicians. I would love to see a society that honors storytellers more than politicians. And I don't think I'm alone in feeling that way. I actually think that's a pretty global feeling. I think one of the hardest parts about working through internalized racism, especially towards Indigenous peoples, is this self-embodiment of humanity. Nobody ever wants to lose that feeling. Ever. To lose the embodied experience or awareness of your humanity. However you conceptualize your humanity, you have a concept of what that looks like for you. And no one ever wants to let that go, because that's how monsters get made, right? That's what psycho or sociopathy is, right? When we lose our humanity. But it's what that looks like to you, how you describe humanity to yourself. And one of the coolest things that I think we are reassured by, thanks to all of our storytellers, is that we have a pretty universal concept of what our humanity looks like and what losing our humanity looks like. A lot of this kind of goes back to Hammurabi's Code, to be honest. We universally, at some point, have agreed that rape and murder is really not great stuff, right? We have some ideas about what makes human monsters. And over, we see these themes reiterated outside biblical text, outside of Abrahamic frameworks. No matter what story you're listening to or reading or feeling in your body for the first time or the 100th time, we have a shared but personal and unique idea of what humanity is and what it means to lose it. And the process of acknowledging indigenous experience and existence under conditions of enforced erasure is a process of rebuilding your perceptions of humanity. It will always be that way. And that's a deeply personal and unique to you and your perspective construction, but it's also shared because this history and the current events present day is a shared experience. When you embody values or follow policies that reinforce Native and Indigenous erasure, you lose humanity, and you know it. And under systems of oppression, most people are forced, in order to stay alive, under threat of housing and food insecurity, threat to their children's welfare, threat to their own bodies, or whatever aggregated wealth they've managed to collect. Everyone will participate in Indigenous erasure by default. This inhuman place, I'm going to quote Stephen King, really does make human monsters. Take a look at Buck. Because of course it does. It's not human to erase other humans. It's not human to commit genocide. There's no humanity in that. We know that. I think we're all still just flinching at the implications about the monstrosities we continue to see reemerging in history, in time, over and over, in humanity, in our species, that we are capable of constructing in human places that will create monsters of us. We don't want to face our ability to destroy ourselves, because we would then have to take responsibility for that. That's a growth moment. An opportunity for growth. And taking responsibility for our capacity to create inhumane environments starts with enforcing humane environments upon yourself, your creature self, both in your mind and in your body, to honor your humanity, your physical self, because your neurology is physical, the computer of your mind is biological, and it was this biology that built every last piece of technology we have today. The same power lives in your cells. And the capacity to destroy or create has always been ours. The internal conflict we wrestle with here is not a new conflict. Am I good? Am I bad? Is there such a thing as evil and good, or God and the devil? These external depictions of this internal conflict, this sure knowledge that we can be monstrous, and what that says about us as individuals and as a collective, as a species. And deciding together where we want to go from here. We can't decide alone, or maybe I should say we should decide alone and then see if maybe we ended up deciding together after all. Because again, with the spheres of influence, gotta start inside your own head, your own body, your own humanity, and what humanity means to you, before you can start habits and behaviors that see that definition of humanity replicated in your immediate environment, and then possibly by way of influence, spheres of influence even, in a broader environment. And it can be rapid. It can be so quick. That butterfly wing of change can be instantaneous in a way that makes this so much more dangerous. But it also means we have a lot of opportunities right now to take advantage of for the future of our solar system, but no big deal. One thing we don't see in any narrative is a collectively agreed intuitive sense of present real time. And I think that's what I'm really trying to create by being present and real time and just shooting the shit, as it were. But I think I'm doing a lot more than that. Don't forget to. Yeah, you know, like